Good morning, everyone. So I will kick us off. My name is Melissa Henderson. I have the privilege of serving as the Chief of Staff here at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, as well as Executive Director of the Texas Higher Education Foundation. Appreciate everyone joining us on the call this morning. For those of you just joining, a quick reminder to please mute your microphone if you are not speaking, and to please use either the chat or raising your hand to ask questions. And we will get going this morning, and I will turn it over to Commissioner Harrison Keller. Commissioner?
Good morning, and welcome to this morning's briefing to discuss latest updates about FAFSA. I know many of you on the call. For those I haven't met, I'm Harrison Keller. I'm the Texas Commissioner of Higher Education. And I'd like to thank each of you, especially our colleagues from our Texas institutions, for joining us on this call to learn about the recent changes, the updates, the guidance from the department when it comes to navigating the new FAFSA. So we certainly understand and we appreciate the concerns of the institutions that you've shared with us, and we at the coordinating board share many of those concerns about what we've seen in terms of the challenges, the rollout of the FAFSA, and especially in terms of the declines of students who have been submitting the FAFSA. So we certainly appreciate our colleagues from the department engaging with us in this conversation so we can talk about the way forward, and appreciate this opportunity to discuss these topics with them. So joining us today are Dr. Nasser Pader, who's Assistant Secretary of Post-Secondary Education at the Department. We'll share a FAFSA update. We also have Tyra Mariani, who serves as Special Advisor to the Secretary, and she works in the College Support Strategy. We also have Linnea Hinkst, who's a Program Specialist with Federal Student Aid. After they provide their updates, there will be time for you to ask questions and to engage in dialogue. And if there are any materials or resources that are shown in the briefing, we will be sure to follow up and make sure that you all get those materials as well. So thank you again for your time and partnership and joining us this morning. And I will now turn it over to Dr. Pader to kick off the conversation. Nasser?
Thank you, Harrison, and good to see you, Harrison, here, and good to see all of you here. Delighted that we have the opportunity to have this moment where we can give you some updates and also take some questions. Now, prior to joining the Department of Education just about a year ago, I served in higher education for 36 years. I was chancellor of 2 universities and provost as well for a number of years. And so I have worked closely with financial aid officers and staff, and I know how incredibly demanding the job of financial aid staff can be. And this year, your responsibilities are even more challenging. You have a tough job, and your job is even tougher. So today we are hoping to give you some updates, talk to you, as Harrison mentioned, about how we are supporting colleges, college support strategy, and also take your questions and comments and suggestions as we go through the program. So before I send it to Tyra, who could talk to us about how we are supporting institutions, especially institutions that need our support there. Let me give you a quick update on FAFSA. So as we all know, FSA has been working on updating FAFSA. And this is really the most significant changes to the financial aid system in many decades. New formula, new process, connection to IRS. But the hope is that the better FAFSA actually will increase the number of students that qualify for aid, maybe over 600,000 more students qualifying for the maximum payout, over 1.5 million. And it does take less time. But we launched it a few months after we thought we could. It was launched in December. To date, we have nearly 6 million have submitted their forms, and we have started to roll out ICER's delivery. As of Wednesday, 1.7 million ICERs were sent to institutions. 3,600 schools have received ICERs, and about a third of them have downloaded them. And I think, some of the softwares, I think banner was supposed to be updating today. So there are some other issues that will be resolved shortly, and also setting up Ed Connect, and that we hope to be able to help with that as well. So we are ramping up the volume of ICERs we are sending out, and we aim to fully process a FAFSA application that already have been submitted in the coming weeks. At the same time, we are supporting higher education associations led by ACE, calling for institutions to push back their commitment deadline to accommodate for the delay in ICER delivery. Now, recognizing, I know how busy financial offices are, and especially this year, we want to free up and the resources for institutions to deliver financial aid for students. So we are significantly reducing verification requirements from, like, it used to be 20%, 30%. It's going to be much a smaller percentage. We are suspending all new routine program reviews through June 24, and we are waiving the 90-day requirement for schools whose PPA expires in March, June, and September, with the hope that we can support you and give more time for processing of the ICERs. Now, at this point, I want to send it to Tyra, who could talk about our how we are supporting institutions, and then we'll take questions and try to answer them after Tyra speaks. Tyra?
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Nasser. As Nasser noted, I am serving as senior advisor to the secretary leading our college support strategy. The college support strategy was announced in early February, recognizing the time crunch and the context in which financial aid officers would be operating to get aid out to schools. So we did a couple of things in launching this strategy, a few things actually. One is we launched a concierge inbox, and that inbox was serving, I like to say, the same as it does at a hotel, where you have a place that you can go and ask just about any question, and we are there to respond and get you to the place you need and respond to your questions. The overwhelming number of responses or the overwhelming number of things that have come into the inbox have been requests for support. It's working well. We are responding quickly, and the requests have been anything from outreach support and FAFSA completion to training to more intensive support through our nonprofit partners. And to say more about this dimension of the support, we are working with NASPA and the Partnership for Education Advancement to provide more intensive support to lower resource schools. And there are a number of Texas institutions that are on that list. We know that there's some colleges and institutions that have a very small number of staff. Maybe you've got openings and you just know that you're not going to be able to get through the backlog and get those packages to families and students as quickly as it needs to happen. And so in those instances, we are connecting schools with our partners to provide that kind of support. We've also received support, again, from these lower resource colleges, or requests for support, rather, to assess system readiness. So in some instances, colleges are saying, hey, I think I'm ready, but I'm not sure. Can you take a look and make sure that we're in a position? So what we want to make sure happens through all of this effort is that you are in a position that as the ICERs start flowing, and they, of course, are now, that you feel situated and prepared to receive those ICERs, recognizing, as Nasser noted, a number of institutions are waiting on updates from their vendors, and we do understand that. But to the extent that you make sure you can get into EdConnect, get into those mailboxes, we want to make sure that we can provide the support that's necessary in this process. And the last thing that we've done worth mentioning is also deploy federal personnel to campuses and to communities, touching base with schools to find out how they're doing and offer any support and technical assistance that we we can as well. So we're here to respond. We're ready to respond, and know that there are a myriad of resources available from the department through partnerships that we have established to support schools in getting through this crunch period and ramping up to be successful with the better FAFSA. And so with that, I will pause and turn it over for, I believe we're at the point of questions.
Great, thank you. So we have a question in the chat, whether there are any potential flexibilities to gainful employment reporting deadlines.
We have heard, and we are looking at it. No update today, but thanks for that question. Working on it.
We also have a question about how institutions will know how many ICERs are at Department of Ed pending to be sent, and whether there's a goal date for all to be sent.
I'm happy to take that one. Nasser and I are a mean tag team, and we also have our colleague Linnea who's on to answer questions as well. We are anticipating clearing the backlog within approximately a couple of weeks of reaching peak capacity. As you all know, ICERs have been increasingly flowing to you. I have a colleague who, I love her metaphor of saying it's like turning on a faucet. You get one, and then you get dozens, and then you get hundreds, and you get thousands. We are, again, anticipating completing that backlog, I'd say within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks would be fair, when you can expect to have received everything that we had up until the point that ICER started flowing. Of course, you will make effort to ramp up FAFSA completion as we are doing the same. And so that will start flowing more regularly, I anticipate within the next, like I said, 2 to 3 weeks.
I should also add that, as I mentioned, 1.7 million have been sent as of Wednesday, but only like a third of them have been downloaded by institutions. So there are lots of them that needs to be downloaded as well.
And I think this is speaking to the same issue that you were just mentioning, but I just wanted to go through the questions. There is a question about when the department will be processing ICERs at peak volume. Guidance says it will take 2 weeks after that point to catch up with the backlog, which I think is what you just spoke to, but I just wanted to acknowledge that question as well. There's a question about when the department will begin reprocessing ICERs for known issues like assets.
I can
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to take that question. Happy to do that. We are doing that as we go along, as we continue to evaluate the batches of ICERs that are pushed out to schools and states and designated scholarship organizations. So depending on the issue that we find, we are either processing those right away or as soon as we implement a fix. So there are different timelines for those things and when we'll have those fixes in place to solve some of those issues. So ongoing, we're doing some of that now, and we will continue to do so in the coming weeks.
Thank you. So we have a question or a comment and question. We're seeing issues with the ICERs we've received regarding student income not being considered, and some with no SAI, but no reject or C codes. Is that known and being addressed?
Yes, we are aware of several issues. In fact, I believe it was just last night, we did finally update the Knowledge Center, specifically the issues alerts page, to reflect many of those known issues, as well as marking which of those previously known issues have since been resolved since we started processing ICERs. I would advise you to take a look at the Knowledge Center today just to see some of the detail of those known issues. And in fact, I do believe we will be putting out an electronic announcement that addresses some of those SAI calculations as well later today.
Thank you. Question, out of all of the ICERs processed, how many have been rejected? If that's known.
We do not have that number to share today, but I can say that later this week, we are hoping to detail kind of what we're calling a FAFSA tracker on that FAFSA simplification topics page, which is on the Knowledge Center. So we'll be providing some more tangible data about how far into the backlog we are in processing ICERs.
So next question is, do we have a date of when corrections will be available to students? We are seeing a higher volume of rejected ICERs than usual and want to be able to communicate with students of a date when they can fix.
Yep, I will say that we are adjusting our messaging for students to let them know that corrections is not yet available. We will be announcing updates when corrections are anticipated, first to the Knowledge Center. So again, I know I just said be watching that, but I would definitely be encouraging you to be watching this week and next for some updates regarding corrections. And as soon as that is announced to the Knowledge Center, we will also share that information with students and families.
Can you shed any light on the issue of the student contribution from assets causing the SAI not to calculate for dependent students?
I think that may be related to the earlier question. Again, I would point folks to review the issues alerts page on the Knowledge Center. If that doesn't address the question, like I alluded to earlier as well, we're hoping to detail some of those SAI calculation issues that we are seeing in an EA later this week.
So this one is more of a comment. I work in the aid office and filed my FAFSA to be able to see how things are working from the student perspective. I know my FAFSA was processed last Friday, but I still have not received an email from the student perspective that it has been processed. The only reason I know it's been processed is because I work in financial aid, and then we have someone else commenting that they've had the same experience. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yes, I can speak to that as well. So for clarity, and as we published in an electronic announcement, I believe it was early last week, we are actually not sending your FAFSA has been processed email notifications in real time. We are sending those notifications in batches. So it is very possible that until we send out those batch of emails, that students and applicants are not receiving those notifications just yet. We are in all of our studentaid.gov guidance encouraging students that the best way to get the most up-to-date status on their FAFSA form is to log into studentaid.gov and view their status on their dashboard. If their form is processed, they'll also be able to access a copy of their FAFSA submission summary.
We have another comment and question similar to one a few minutes ago. We hear there are issues with ICERs like no SAI or provisional SAI with no reject or C code issues. Is this true? What is the fix and when?
I think we're getting the same iteration, the different iterations of the same question. Again, I would just point people to the issues alert because we have just updated that with more details of known issues.
We have another question, which I won't read again, but about correct timing for corrections. So just noting that there are multiple questions about timing for when students will be able to make corrections. I have a question about what has been the turnaround on paper FAFSAs.
So as we detailed in an electronic announcement that we previously released to the Knowledge Center, we will not be processing paper FAFSA forms until we have worked through the backlog of online FAFSA forms that were submitted. We have not yet worked through that entire backlog of online forms, but we are still committed, as we previously detailed, to processing those online forms as soon as we have finished. I'm sorry, we will be processing the paper forms, excuse me, as soon as we have worked through that backlog of online forms.
So another comment question here. Another way the department could provide support is to provide more resources for customer service support. Example, EdConnect issues. We had staff wait on hold for 1.5 hours last week and then were disconnected attempting to get help with EdConnect. And then someone else chiming in that they experienced similar issues with the support line. Didn't know if you wanted to speak to that.
I'm happy to take that one or take one off Linnea's hands. We are aware of the delays through the on the customer service side, and we are working to build capacity. We've also issued the what we're calling a plain language guide on the EdConnect issues. And so our hope is that schools can try the information that's being provided and see if that helps address the problem. So a bit of a self-help, if you will. And so we are both adding people, but also trying to push out resources that we believe can help address some of the common issues that are coming up. We also did other things to help alleviate what was coming in, again, working on some of those top issues by making other resources available. But if schools are still running into errors and need to call the help desk, of course they can and should, and know that capacity is being added there as well.
Another couple of questions about how many ICERs have been rejected. So just want to acknowledge there are additional questions about that and folks indicating that they've seen a higher number of rejected FAFSAs than usual. Question about how does the 6 million applicant number compare to the same time last year? Concerns about reduced financial aid application rate, and then a subsequent comment about someone's understanding that the high school senior FAFSA filers are down by 33% nationally. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Maybe I could say that we are aware of it, of course. We know the numbers, but we are really connecting with high schools, with all sources. We have a strategy to actually ramp up our connection, and we have a week of FAFSA that we have declared that we are going to go out and recruit. So we are doing everything we can. FSA is doing everything they can to increase the applications for that. And we hope that as we get closer to the deadline, the numbers will pick up even and accelerate at a higher rate.
I'd also like to add, so a couple of things and ways that you all can help. We know that high school counselors, for example, and others have been, those that work with Hispanic students have been advising them not to complete the FAFSA, which should not have been the case, but understand why that was happening. So we really need schools to ramp up the message and again, support the completion efforts that are underway at the department, at the state level, at the institution level, at the K-12 level, quite frankly, to make sure that students know they can and should be submitting those applications. We're also making institutions aware, particularly at the K-12 level, the tracker that is on our website that allows you to see by high school what the FAFSA completion rate is. And so to the extent that a school is wondering whether or not their students have done it, again, at the high school level, they can go in, you can go in, particularly if they're feeder patterns where you tend to get students from certain schools, having a sense again of where students are can help target what existing outreach efforts are. So know that there are a number of tools available to assess, and we're also encouraging, as the Deputy Secretary has said, friendly competition to get those FAFSA completion numbers up. But as Nasser noted, we're aware they're down. We're aware why and are participating in getting out the message to get those numbers up and rapidly.
So we have another comment and question about several students who have completed their FAFSA in January, but the site shows not processed. Can you explain why that might be happening?
That can be a little difficult to give a specific answer to student status. So I would encourage folks that if they see at their institution that there is a large segment of students with that status, please do submit through the Partner Connect customer service form that is on the Partner Connect website. Please do feel free to send us additional details, and we're always happy to research that.
Going back to the paper FAFSAs, do you have a goal date for processing those?
I will just say it's difficult to establish an exact date just because, again, our priority is getting through the backlog of the online forms first. So as quickly as we are able to get through that backlog, and I think we feel that we are making good progress against that backlog. Again, we'll share some detailed numbers to the Knowledge Center, hopefully this week or next, just to give you an idea of how we are progressing through the backlog. But once that is completed, as soon as we finish that backlog, we can get into paper form processing.
So there's a few questions about students with parents or contributors with no SSN. Have there been individuals that have verified and submitted their FAFSA successfully? So some questions around that topic.
Yeah, I think I saw in the chat just a question of whether there have been students within that population who have a contributor without a social security number, whether we've seen any of those students be successful in submitting a completed FAFSA. The answer to that is yes. We have seen quite a good number of students that have been able to successfully submit their online FAFSA form with contributors that do not have a social security number. I think it was also nodded to earlier that we do also know that there are students within that population that are still having issues submitting. We did publish guidance, updated guidance on studentaid.gov, both in English and in Spanish for students, guidance for what they can do if they are a student who's trying to apply online with a contributor who does not have a social security number. So I would encourage folks, if you have not recently seen that guidance, to look for that on studentaid.gov.
So a question and comment here. An EA in December was published saying we have to address dual tax filers, i.e. have a 200 IRS response code and also filed a tax return in Puerto Rico. And we are having trouble identifying how to identify this population based on the relevant question being skipped online. It'd be helpful to have further guidance on these details.
That is another question just because of its technical nature. I would direct the person who asked it to submit that question via that Partner Connect customer service form. And again, we're happy to take a little deeper look at that and issue a response and follow up.
There's also a question about a backlog of around 70,000 emails that was identified last week, if there's an update on that.
Happy to take this one. That backlog has been cleared.
A comment question. I believe it was mentioned only a third of the 1.7 million ICERs sent to schools have been downloaded. Do you have a team digging into why this may be? Understanding the challenges with the EdConnect, this could be largely being a contributor, but what else, how are you focusing on providing help to institutions, or I'm sorry, in providing institutions to help? Can you look into who these institutions are and have support contact directly to help with the hold wait times for support?
We are aware of the number of schools that have or have not downloaded their ICERs. We have heard from schools that they haven't done it yet because they are waiting on the vendor update our software. So you're right that it's a number of different issues, anything from EdConnect to schools quite intentionally waiting. So we're obviously encouraging and tracking what's happening on the vendor side as well, to the extent that that's been a contributor, as well as what I mentioned earlier of getting resources out, as well as increasing capacity at the help desk where there are particular software issues that schools are running into.
There's a question about possible AY25 maximum Pell reduction and whether that's there. There's an update there. The direct question is, you're hearing chatter about a possible AY25 maximum Pell reduction. Is there an AY25 maximum Pell reduction possible at this point?
I don't think so. We have requested for 25 a $750 increases in Pell going forward, but I'm not aware of what you just said.
Also a question about whether it's known how many students indicated provisional independent status.
That is another number that unfortunately we don't have prepared to share today, but certainly happy if there are specific questions about assisting that population that we'd be happy to triage.
Of course, there's some questions about data sharing guidance that might be forthcoming and what the ETA might be on that.
We at FSA are just as eager to get that out to you as you want to read it. I know that it seems like we've been maybe kicking that guidance down the road. It is very much our intention to get that finalized guidance out to you. It is complex in that there are multiple agencies with legal authority over that guidance. So as soon as we do have final legal interpretation, to the many, many questions that several of you have submitted over recent months about FTI and FAFSA data use sharing, we'll provide those to the Knowledge Center.
So just a comment here that there are some parents who've not yet received the invitation to contribute to completing the FAFSA. So just wanted to acknowledge that comment in the chat. There's a question about what happens if a student is a US citizen and is eligible for FAFSA, but their parent is not a citizen and does not have documents to verify them. Questions about how that may be resolved.
So I do just want to be clear that a parent's citizenship status on its own does not disqualify a student from receiving federal student aid funds. We are really looking at either the eligible non-citizen status or eligible citizen status of the student to determine their eligibility for federal student aid. That being said, because of the new requirements under the law and because we are required to verify the identity for purposes of retrieving and securing federal tax information received from the IRS, we have to be able to authenticate someone's identity. So we've detailed the process for for if someone is a citizen, how they confirm their identity. If someone does not have a social security number, how they can potentially validate their identity online through the knowledge-based questions issued via TransUnion. And there is also the alternate process in which they would need to submit documentation of their identity as well as an attestation form. While we are not requiring that they show proof of their residency or their current status in the United States, if you review the list of acceptable documentation, you will note that they need to show some sort of proof of documentation of their identity.
So just a comment here about the importance of transparency and notifications around the regarding paper FAFSA forms, et cetera. So just want to acknowledge that comment in the chat. Question about, we're seeing that there are issues with marital status that conflict with the FTI, i.e. married contributor that says they filed jointly with current spouse, but then the FTI filing status is head of household. We believe the AVG says we need to question this, so we are worried about how many of these there will be. Is this a known issue with the DDX working this way? There's a lot of acronyms in there, so I just wanted to read that one verbatim.
Sadly, I know all those acronyms from many years working in financial aid. I again would say, look at the issues alert that was just updated overnight. If you do not see the issue that you are referencing reflected in that alert, again, please do send us via that the Partner Connect website customer care form, details of the issue that you are seeing, and we are happy to investigate that.
So kind of building on that, a question about, is it helpful for us to report issues we are seeing with ICERs to the department? If so, what method should we use?
That customer care support form that I mentioned is a good way to do it. If they are specific to the ICER, like you are seeing issues with the ICERs that you are receiving, you're having difficulties downloading the ICERs, or otherwise have questions about how the FAFSA Federal Processing System or FPS are behaving, I will note there is also that separate FPS SAIG help desk. The contact information for that specific help desk to provide some of those more technical answers is posted on the Knowledge Center, and then more specifically on the right-hand side of the FAFSA simplification information page that is on the Knowledge Center. And I think we could provide that direct number and follow up as well if we need to.
So going back to the Pell question from earlier, will they be increasing the max Pell amount for FY 25? And if so, when will it be approved so that we can know if we need to increase our budgets?
Well, I mean, this week we are anxiously waiting for approval of our 24 budget. And the for 25 budget administration has requested budget for higher education increases in number of areas, including in Pell. And but I think that right now the focus is on 24 budget.
So another comment on provisional independent status, the schools need to document the student meets the definition, so it would be good to know since it's new for 24, 25. Just want to acknowledge that comment. How do we handle the attestation and validation process for parents who live outside of the country?
So I want to be clear that the attestation and validation process is a process that the individual without the Social Security number completes with the department directly, not with the school. So the school doesn't have to make any sort of determination of their identity verification. The process for completing that is detailed on both studentaid.gov as well as on the Knowledge Center in an electronic announcement.
So that is the end of the questions that we currently have in the chat. I want to give folks an opportunity to add other questions or to raise their hands and ask questions outside of the chat. We have a few minutes left with our colleagues at the Department of Education, so I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask their questions and hear directly from the department. Sounds like it may be good to go back to the data sharing guidance question. There's another question about did that question get answered?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, we have not yet released the Dear Colleague letter that details some of the provisions and allowable uses of FTI and FAFSA data use sharing. We're hoping to have that published in the very near term as soon as we can.
Any other questions that folks have? Oh, here we go. Do you want to see, I'm sorry, they're popping in now. Do you want us to report ICER issues we are seeing?
Yes, we encourage you to look again at that issues alert page first on the Knowledge Center, just to make sure that we haven't already identified one of those issues that you are seeing. But otherwise, yes, please do use that customer support form on FSA Partner Connect to report issues, specific issues that you're seeing. And I will note the more details you provide us with, the better.
So a question about if a school has received an ICER with a good SAI, can a school feel comfortable to award on the current calculated SAI received? Have you identified any need to recalculate all of the SAIs?
If the question is whether or not we have any confidence in the SAIs that are calculated, we do. We have not identified any issues that impact all SAIs on all ICERs processed to date.
There's a question about suggestions around processing second chance Pell or PEP students since paper FAFSAs are not being processed at this time.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the first half of that question. Would you mind repeating it?
Sure. Whether y'all have any suggestions about processing second chance Pell students and or PEP students since paper FAFSAs are not being processed at this time.
I mean, I guess I'm a little thrown by that question only because we haven't started processing paper forms. So if the question is really when we will be processing paper forms for students such as incarcerated individuals, again, we will be starting the processing of those paper forms as soon as we work through the online form backlog. We are absolutely prioritizing that to be completed as soon as possible. In terms of what schools should do with those students. I mean, ultimately, that is up to the institution about how they are reserving funds or counseling students. But in terms of what is our guidance for when we will get to those forms, it will be in the weeks following the processing of online forms.
So there's a question about, you mentioned the percentage selected for verification will decrease. Do you have a sense by how much, essentially?
Extremely small number. Percentage. Extremely.
And there's a question, you talked about increasing support capacity for schools, if you have a sense of how quickly that support will be onboarded to meet the demand.
So our partners are ready to go, and it really is based on the interactions with the schools. So if you are a school that has requested support, we ask you to respond as quickly as possible. So once we pretty much daily, as support requests come in, we both seek to understand the request first, and then we follow up accordingly. If it's something that FSA can handle, we handle it within the department. If it's sending it to our partners, but then our partners are looking to do an intake to better understand where you are, what your needs are. In some instances, we're following up with schools because the school has not yet replied to that partner. We also then have issues where we want to make sure that the scope of work or contracting is understood and is approved. We get delays from schools in that instance as well. So our partners are very much ready to deploy teams, a person, a systems person, or staffing to support in the aid packaging. And they are ready to get started sooner than later. In some instances, we actually have schools that want them to wait. And we are encouraging, please do not wait. Get that connection made, make the onboarding happen, so that as the capacity or as the flow of ICERs increases even more, staff are ready to go. So again, that actual meeting demand is happening. And we also need schools to respond as quickly as possible, ensuring their part to help get that team onboarded.
I recognize we are just about at time, so I think we have time for maybe one more question, and this may have already been addressed about the specific date. An administrator can go online and make corrections such as dependency override. I think we've touched on that, but I just want to make sure.
Yes, we have not announced a specific date yet.
And any question, there's a question about chances that 25-26 may be delayed. I don't know if you want to speak to that before we wrap, kind of the road ahead.
Well,
Okay, sorry. So
I hope not, and it won't be. We work hard. FSA is working very hard. Maybe at this point, I take the opportunity to thank actually Lena and Tyra for all you're doing. FSA staff are working very hard to get all the ICERs roll out to institutions. I want to take the opportunity to thank financial aid officers that are online. What you do changes people's lives. Financial aid opens doors. We are going to increase the number of applicants going forward. The campaign that we have working with high schools and others, and we are working very hard to fix all of these issues and hoping that the software providers would also update their softwares to accommodate all of this. So thank you for all you're doing. Really appreciate it, Harrison. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. Melissa, thank you so much for your coordination of the efforts here, and delighted that we had the opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nasser, for you and your colleagues for the discussion and for taking our questions. We will share the information back with our financial aid officers and with our colleagues across the state. And we appreciate the partnership with the institutions, and we'll work in close collaboration as we're navigating these issues together. But thank you again to our colleagues from the department for this morning's discussion.
Thank you. By the way, we have a webinar, national webinar tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time that I will go over more information there. So you're all welcome if you haven't joined or plan to join to the meeting webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.